They say karma's a witch, but watching your wife fall for someone else in real time while she thinks you're too stupid to notice? That's a special kind of hell. Want to know something funny, though? While she was busy playing footsie with her work project, under expensive restaurant tables, I was planning the kind of exit strategy that would make a stealth bomber proud. She thought I was just another dumb pilot who'd keep the lights on while she found herself. Big mistake. Huge mistake. By the time she realized what hit her, my son and I were already gone, and her perfect little Goldman Sachs world was about to crash and burn spectacularly. But let me start from the beginning. You know what's funny about life? Sometimes you can see the storm coming from miles away, but you still convince yourself the sky is clear. That's what happened with my marriage to Emma. Looking back now, I should have noticed the warning signs earlier. But when you're flying at 35,000 feet for a living, sometimes you miss what's happening on the ground. I'm Michael Reynolds, a commercial pilot for American Airlines. Been flying the friendly skies for 15 years now. Great job, decent pay, and a schedule that gives me enough time at home with my son Jake. Or at least, that's what I thought. It was a regular Tuesday evening in our Dallas home. I had just returned from a 3-day route to London, still slightly jet-lagged, but happy to be home. Jake, my 11-year-old from my first marriage, was upstairs working on his science project. Emma, my wife of 6 years and a hotshot financial analyst at Goldman Sachs, was sitting across from me at her kitchen island, barely touching her dinner. Something was off. Usually, Emma would be filling me in on the latest Wall Street drama or asking about my flight. Instead, she was pushing her grilled chicken around the plate like it was a spreadsheet she couldn't balance. "Everything okay?" I asked, taking a sip of water. She looked up, and I swear, in that moment, I felt like I was watching a stranger wearing my wife's face. Her next words would change everything. "Michael, I think we should try an open marriage." The water I was drinking nearly went down the wrong way. For a second, I thought the jet lag was playing tricks on my mind. But no, Emma sat there, cool as a cucumber, like she'd just suggested we try a new restaurant. "It's just," she continued, her manicured fingers tapping on the granite countertop. "Sarah from work, she and her husband have this arrangement. It's working wonderfully for them. More freedom, more experiences, but with the stability of marriage." I set my glass down carefully, years of pilot training, keeping my hands steady even as my world started to tilt. "That's not the kind of marriage I signed up for, Emma." She didn't even flinch, just shrugged those designer-clad shoulders and said, "I figured you'd say that." Then she stood up, Louboutins clicking on the hardwood floor as she walked away, leaving her barely touched dinner and our conversation hanging in the air like turbulence waiting to happen. Later that night, as I lay awake listening to the distant sound of planes taking off from DFW Airport, I realized this wasn't just a conversation. It was a notification. Emma had already made up her mind, and I was just the last one to know. They say silence speaks louder than words, and in aviation, radio silence is never a good sign. The morning after our open marriage conversation, I experienced a different kind of silence that was equally disturbing. Emma was already in the kitchen when I came down. Usually, she'd be rushing around in her designer work clothes, making coffee, and checking her phone for pre-market updates. But today was different. She was just there, standing by the coffee maker in her silk robe, scrolling through her phone like she was alone in the house. "Morning," I said, reaching for a coffee mug. Nothing, not even a glance. The only sound was the gentle whir of our expensive coffee machine, a wedding anniversary gift from her parents. Jake came bouncing down the stairs, full of 11-year-old energy. "Morning, Dad." "Morning, Emma." His cheerful voice echoed in the kitchen. Emma barely managed a mumbled morning without looking up from her phone. I watched Jake's smile fade slightly, and something in my chest tightened. At work, I went through my pre-flight checklist with mechanical precision, but my mind kept drifting back home. Usually, Emma would send a quick, "have a safe flight" text before takeoff. I checked my phone one last time before putting it on airplane mode. Nothing. During my layover in Chicago, I tried calling her. Straight to voicemail. I sent a text asking about her day. Read, but no response. The blue check marks on WhatsApp felt like tiny daggers. When I got home that evening, the house was quiet. Jake was at his desk, visible through his open door, focused on homework. Emma was on the couch, laptop open, spreadsheets filling the screen. She didn't look up when I walked in. "Had a good day." I tried. She responded with a non-committal without taking her eyes off the screen. The wedding ring on her finger caught the light as she typed, a glinting reminder of promises that suddenly felt very fragile. I want to check on Jake, helping him with his math homework. Through the open door, I could hear Emma on the phone, her voice animated as she discussed market trends with someone from work. The contrast between her silence toward me and her engagement with others was deafening. That night at dinner, Jake tried to tell us about his day at school, something about a science experiment gone hilariously wrong. Emma just pushed her food around her plate, occasionally nodding without really listening. I watched my son's enthusiasm deflate with each passing minute. After Jake went to bed, I tried one more time. We should talk about this, Emma. She finally looked at me, her expression blank. There's nothing to talk about. Her voice was cool, professional, the same tone she probably used to dismiss underperforming stocks. Then she stood up and walked to our home office, closing the door with a quiet but definitive click. I sat there in our expensive kitchen, surrounded by all the trappings of our successful life, feeling more alone than I ever had at 35,000 feet. This wasn't just the silent treatment. It was a carefully orchestrated symphony of indifference. Man, they say karma's a witch, but watching your wife fall for someone else in real time? That's a whole different ballgame. It started with the phone. You know how people get that dopey look when they're texting someone special? Like teenagers with their first crush? Yeah, that was Emma to AT. There she was, sprawled on our $1,000 couch that she just had to have, giggling at her iPhone like she'd hit the jackpot. I'm not gonna lie, it was driving me up the wall. Every time I walked into the room, boom, there she was, typing away like her life depended on it. The same woman who used to take hours to reply to my texts was now glued to her phone 24/7. Talk about a kick in the teeth. Must be some funny memes, I said one evening, trying to keep it cool. Emma barely looked up, just mumbled work stuff, and kept right on typing. Yeah, right. Because Goldman Sachs is totally in the business of sending laugh-out-loud content at 11 p.m. Give me a break. The real kicker? She started dressing differently. Not just power suit different, but I'm single and ready to mingle different. Designer outfits that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Fancy new hairstyles, the works. She was dolling herself up like she was auditioning for the Real Housewives of Dallas. One night, I was in the kitchen grabbing a late-night snack when I heard her laughing from her bedroom. Not just any laugh. That flirty, honey-sweet laugh she used to say for me back in the day. I stood there, sandwich halfway to my mouth, feeling like someone had just hit the emergency oxygen mask button on my heart. Jake noticed too. God bless him. Dad, he said one morning while we were having breakfast. Emma was running late again. Why does Emma keep taking selfies? She never used to do that. Out of the mouths of babes, right? I just ruffled his hair and said something about social media being popular these days. But the kid was spot on. Emma had gone from barely using Instagram to becoming a regular social media butterfly. The cherry on top? She started going out more. Like way more. Always work events or client meetings that somehow required her to dress like she was hitting the hottest club in town. And let me tell you, I've seen enough flight attendants getting ready for nights out to know the difference between business attire and party wear. Going to a strategy meeting, she'd say, spraying on enough perfume to choke a horse. At 8 p.m. on a Friday, in a dress that definitely wasn't corporate approved. I might spend most of my time in the clouds, but I wasn't born yesterday. She'd come home at odd hours, reeking of expensive wine and wearing that satisfied smirk you see on passengers who just got upgraded to first class. No explanations, no excuses, just a breezy don't wait up tossed over her shoulder like a used napkin. The real gut punch came when I was paying our phone bill online. Emma's data usage had skyrocketed, and there was one number that kept showing up over and over. Hundreds of texts, late-night calls, the whole 9 yards. The contact name? Work project. Right. And I'm the Easter Bunny. It was crystal clear what was happening. My wife wasn't just checking out of our marriage. She was already flying a different route with someone else. And there I was, stuck in a holding pattern, watching it all go down in high definition. But hey, at least she was happy, right? Sitting there every evening, face lit up by her phone screen, giggling away at messages from nobody. Meanwhile, I was just the guy who kept the lights on and the mortgage paid, about as important as the backup generator on a sunny day. Here's the thing about kids. They see everything, even when you think they don't. And Jake, well, He was picking up on the changes faster than my altitude readings during takeoff. It started small like most things do. One evening, I was helping Jake with his homework when he dropped a bomb that hit harder than any turbulence I'd ever flown through. "Dad," he said, pushing his math book aside, "why doesn't Emma eat dinner with us anymore?" Talk about being caught in a tailspin. What was I supposed to say? Oh, your stepmom's too busy texting her secret friend to bother with family time. Instead, I just sat there, feeling like I was trying to land a plane in zero visibility. "She's been pretty busy with work lately, buddy," I said, pulling the oldest excuse in the book. Jake just gave me this look that screamed, "I wasn't born yesterday, Dad." Smart kid. Too smart for his own good sometimes. "She used to be busy before, too," he pointed out, sharp as a tack. "But she still had dinner with us. And she used to help me with my English homework. Now she just says she has calls." Ouch. Right in the landing gear. The changes in Emma were hitting Jake hard, even if he didn't show it in obvious ways. He stopped asking her for help with his homework. Stopped telling her about his day at school. Stopped trying to show her the cool airplane models we built together on weekends. One morning, I caught him eating breakfast alone in the kitchen. Emma was there too, but she might as well have been in another time zone, totally absorbed in her phone. The look on Jake's face, man, it made me want to hit the emergency eject button on this whole situation. "Dad," he whispered later that day, "did I do something wrong? Is Emma mad at me?" And there it was, the moment that felt like a complete system failure at 35,000 feet. My son thought he was the reason his stepmom was checking out of our lives. That one hit me right in the gut. "No, buddy," I said, pulling him in for a hug. "You didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes grown-ups just go through phases." But Jake wasn't buying what I was selling. He's always been good at reading the instruments, so to speak. "Sarah from my class," he said, picking at a loose thread on his sleeve. "Her parents got divorced last year. Her mom started acting weird first, kind of like Emma is now." Well, if that didn't feel like a nosedive straight into reality. The final straw came during Jake's school science fair. He'd been working his tail off on a project about aerodynamics. Chip off the old block, I tell you. Emma had promised to be there. One of those half-hearted "sure, I'll try" promises that aren't worth the air they're spoken into. Jake kept looking at the door during his presentation. Every time it opened, his eyes would light up, then dim again when it wasn't her. She never showed, of course. Too busy with another client meeting that just couldn't wait. That night, as I was tucking him in, he said something that broke my heart into more pieces than a plane has parts. "It's okay, Dad," he whispered, trying to sound grown up. "I know Emma doesn't want to be part of our family anymore. We were okay before her. We'll be okay after. Out of the mouths of babes, right?" Here I was, trying to navigate through this storm, and my 11-year-old was already plotting our emergency landing route. You know that moment in flying when you realize something's seriously wrong with your aircraft? That split second when all your training kicks in and you know it's do or die. Yeah, my marriage hit that point at exactly 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday night. I've been tossing and turning, jet lag messing with my sleep schedule after a long-haul flight from Tokyo. That's when I heard it, Emma's little giggle. You know the one, that soft, secret laugh that used to be mine. There she was, lying next to me in our king-sized bed, phone screen lighting up her face like a runway at night. She was so wrapped up in whatever was happening on that screen, she didn't even notice I was awake. Talk about being invisible in your own marriage. I lay there, watching her scroll and smile, type and giggle, completely oblivious to the fact that her husband was right there, watching this train wreck in slow motion. The blue light from her phone cast weird shadows on the ceiling, making everything feel surreal, like I was stuck in some twisted dream sequence. That's when her phone buzzed again, and I caught a glimpse of the message preview. "Miss you already. Lunch tomorrow." It wasn't the words that got me. It was her reaction. The way her whole face lit up like a Christmas tree, the same way it used to light up for me. Something inside me snapped. Not in a loud, dramatic way. More like the quiet way ice cracks under pressure. I'd seen enough. This wasn't just about an open marriage anymore. This wasn't even about her checking out of our relationship. This was straight up betrayal, happening right next to me in our bed. I got up quietly and went downstairs to the kitchen, grabbed a beer from the fridge. The fancy craft stuff Emma always said was a waste of money. Ironic how she had no problem wasting money on those designer outfits for her client meetings. Sitting there in the dark, Everything started falling into place like a perfect flight plan. The late nights, the sudden work emergencies, the new clothes, the constant phone checking. It was all part of a carefully orchestrated exit strategy. And me? I was just the sucker still believing in the flight manifest. Jake's words from earlier that week kept echoing in my head. We'll be okay after. My 11-year-old kid had more clarity about this situation than I did. Talk about a kick in the teeth. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through old photos. Emma and me at the airline's Christmas party last year, both smiling. Emma helping Jake with his homework. Family dinners where we actually talked and laughed. It felt like looking at scenes from someone else's life. When did it all go sideways? Was it when I took that extended route to Asia? Or maybe it was earlier, when she got that big promotion. Hell, maybe we were always on different flight paths, and I was too busy checking the gauges to notice we were headed for different destinations. The sun was starting to come up when I finally made my decision. I'd spent my career making split-second choices that could mean the difference between life and death. Now it was time to make one about my own life. I wasn't going to be that guy, the one who sits around waiting for his wife to choose him, like some passenger on standby, hoping for a seat. I deserve better. More importantly, Jake deserved better. As I watched Emma get ready for work that morning, new outfit, extra makeup, that secret smile on her face, I knew we'd reached our point of no return. She was already gone, even if she was still physically here. Time to start planning my own departure. They say proper planning prevents poor performance. In aviation, it's the difference between life and death. In marriage, well, turns out it's pretty much the same thing. I needed a rock-solid exit strategy, something that would protect both me and Jake from the fallout. So I did what any good pilot would do. I started gathering data. Emma had gotten sloppy with her phone. One morning, while she was in the shower, texting her friend as usual, I grabbed it. The password? Still Jake's birthday. What I found made my blood run cold. Hundreds of messages, photos, hotel reservations. I took screenshots of everything, sent them to myself, then covered my tracks. Years of checking instrument panels had made my fingers steady. Next up, legal support. I found this pit bull of an attorney named Richard Martinez. Guy looked like he could smell divorce assets from a mile away. Document everything, he said. Every late night, every missed dinner, every suspicious charge. Bill me a case that's tighter than airport security. So that's exactly what I did. Started keeping a detailed log. When she came home late, logged it. Mystery work dinners. Noted. New expensive outfits. Photographed with dates and prices. Then came to real planning. I'd been sitting on a transfer offer to American's Seattle hub. Better routes, better hours, and most importantly, far from Dallas. My boss didn't even blink when I asked about it. Been wondering when you'd take that offer, Mike. Consider it done. Found this sweet house near a good school in Seattle, with a view of Puget Sound. Jake would love watching the seaplanes. Speaking of Jake, he caught me looking at Seattle homes online. Are we moving, Dad? He asked, trying to sound casual. Maybe, buddy. Would you be okay with that? He shrugged, but I caught the relief in his eyes. Seattle has cool planes, right? The coolest, I said, hugging him. And great science museums, too. I set everything up meticulously. New job lined up. House in escrow. School research for Jake. Opened a separate bank account and moved enough funds to keep us airborne until things settled. Emma didn't suspect a thing. Too busy with her own project to notice her husband planning a major course correction. She still came home late, still texted constantly, still lived in her own world. The irony? She thought she was being so clever, building her new life on the down low. Meanwhile, I was orchestrating our entire departure right under her nose. In aviation, we call that flying under the radar. We left at dawn, just like I was heading out for another routine flight. Jake and I had packed our essentials the night before, worked like ninjas to get everything into my truck without making a sound. Emma was passed out upstairs, probably dreaming about her precious work project. Guess those late-night client meetings really take it out of you. The divorce papers sat on the kitchen counter next to the coffee maker. Her first stop every morning, regular as clockwork. I added a simple sticky note on top. I hope you find the freedom you wanted. Short and sweet, just like our marriage turned out to be. Jake was quiet in the passenger seat, clutching his backpack like it was a life preserver at 35,000 feet. Smart kid only packed what really mattered. His model airplanes, science books, and that old teddy bear he swears he's too grown up for, but still can't sleep without. The rest of his stuff would follow once we got settled. You doing okay, buddy? I asked as we pulled out of the driveway for the last time. He stared at our house, looking way too grown up for 11. She won't even notice we're gone until she needs something, right? Man, that hit me right in the gut. Kid had Emma's number better than I ever did. First stop was the bank. Had to move fast before Emma's Goldman Sachs brain kicked into high gear. The teller raised an eyebrow at the early hour, but processed everything without question. Having your paperwork in order makes life so much easier. Next up was McDonald's, because some mornings just call for comfort food. Jake demolished his Egg McMuffin and hash browns like he hadn't eaten in days. Guess stress does that to a kid. We grabbed extra apple pies for the road. Why not start our new life with a sugar rush? Around 10 a.m., once we crossed state lines, I turned my phone back on. Holy smokes. The screen lit up like a runway at night. 27 missed calls, 43 texts, 15 voicemails. Looks like Emma had found her morning surprise. First voicemail, her voice shaking with rage. What the hell is this? Where are you? Where's Jake? You can't just disappear like this. Oh, but we could. And we did. The messages got better after that. Started with threats. My lawyers will destroy you. Moved to bargaining. We can talk about this. Please come home. Then hit denial. This isn't happening. Emma's greatest hits, Volume 1. The last one was special. You planned this whole thing, didn't you? Right under my nose. I didn't think you had it in you. I deleted them all. No need for Jake to hear that symphony of chaos. By noon, we were halfway to Seattle. Jake was crashed out in the passenger seat, looking more peaceful than he had in months. My lawyer had already filed everything. Emma's perfect little world was unraveling faster than she could text her boyfriend about it. While we drove, my email pinged with updates from the lawyer. Emma had tried to freeze our joint accounts. Too late. She called the police. They told her there was nothing they could do. She'd even called American Airlines, trying to get my new assignment location. No dice. I kept thinking about that sticky note. I hope you find a freedom you wanted. Bet she never thought freedom would feel like this. Alone in our big, empty house. Her perfect plan in shambles. Guess some pilots' wives forget that we're trained to handle emergencies. I knew Emma would come at me with both guns blazing. Goldman Sachs analysts don't take defeat lying down. The first shot came 3 weeks after our departure, delivered by a courier who looked like he charged more per hour than I did. Mr. Reynolds, my lawyer said over the phone, your wife's demands are interesting. The way he said interesting made it sound like a polite substitute for completely insane. Emma wanted everything. Half my pilot salary, a chunk of my pension, even partial ownership of my vintage Mustang that I'd bought before we met. But the real kicker? She wanted compensation for, and I quote, loss of lifestyle expectations. She's arguing that she made career sacrifices to be a pilot's wife, my lawyer explained, barely hiding his amusement. Says she could have been a managing director by now if she hadn't been playing stepmom. I nearly choked on my coffee. Emma, make sacrifices. The woman who missed Jake's science fair for a spa day, who scheduled client meetings during our anniversary dinner. That was rich, even by Wall Street standards. Her legal team was as subtle as a jumbo jet in a china shop. They sent threatening letters, demanded immediate responses, tried to rush the process. Classic Emma. All pressure, no patience. They're trying to stampede us into a settlement, my lawyer said. Good thing we've got our own runway cleared. That's when we launched our counteroffensive. First, we dropped the evidence bombs. Every screenshot, every credit card statement, every hotel receipt I collected. Emma's work project suddenly had a name, face, and a very interesting expense account. Her lawyers tried to spin it. Personal growth exploration, they called it. Really? Is that what the kids are calling it these days? Then came the character witnesses. Jake's teachers talking about Emma's absence from school events. Our neighbors mentioning her late-night arrivals. Even her own assistant accidentally let slip about booking business dinners for 2 at romantic restaurants. The real fun started when Emma's boyfriend's wife got involved. Turns out Emma wasn't the only one exploring personal growth. The other missus got her own lawyer, and suddenly Emma's perfect plan had more holes than Swiss cheese. Your wife's legal team has adjusted their demands, my lawyer reported, sounding mighty pleased with himself. The new proposal was a far cry from the original. No more lifestyle compensation, no pension grab, not even a peep about the Mustang. Emma tried one last play, claiming she'd been an essential parent figure to Jake. That got shut down faster than a runway in a snowstorm. The school record showed she hadn't attended a single parent-teacher conference in 2 years. The judge took one look at our evidence and Emma's claims and made his decision faster than a pre-flight checklist. She got nothing. 0. Zip. Not even her lawyer looked surprised. Later, I heard through the grapevine that Emma's boss wasn't too thrilled about her public drama. Apparently, Goldman Sachs prefers their analysts to keep their personal growth exploration out of the courthouse. As for the boyfriend, his wife took him for everything but his socks. Karma's got a wicked sense of humor sometimes. 2 years can change everything. Jake's now 13, crushing it in middle school, and our life in Seattle feels like we've been here forever. The view of Puget Sound from our deck still takes my breath away, especially when the seaplanes are landing at sunset. I got promoted to senior captain last month. The Seattle routes suit me better. More time at home, better work-life balance. Jake's got a solid group of friends, joined a robotics club, and even started taking flying lessons at the local flight school. Like father, like son, the house feels like home now. Jake's model airplanes hang from his ceiling, science fair trophies line the shelves, and there's always some new gadget he's tinkering with spread across the kitchen table. We got our routine down pat. Breakfast together every morning, homework reviews after school, weekend adventures exploring the Pacific Northwest. I hadn't heard from Emma in all this time. Not a single call, text, or email. The divorce was final, the dust had settled, and life had moved on. Then out of the blue, my phone rang one evening. Emma's name flashed on the screen. For a moment, I just stared at it, feeling like I was looking at a ghost from another life. Jake was in his room working on his science project, classic rock playing softly through his door. Our new normal, peaceful and steady. I almost let go to voicemail. Almost. But something made me pick up. George. Her voice was different, missing that sharp edge I remembered. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I sat there in silence, watching a seaplane touch down on the water through our living room window. I was selfish, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought you'd always be there. I didn't think you'd actually leave. The silence stretched between us like a contrail across the sky. I miss you, she said finally. I watched the seaplane taxi to the dock, smooth and sure of its path. Do you miss me, Emma? Or do you miss the fact that I loved you even when you didn't deserve it? The sharp intake of breath on her end told me the shot had landed. Jake's science fair is in 2 weeks, I said, my voice even. He's built a wind tunnel to test airplane designs. He's really something special. George, please dash. I hope you heal, Emma. But we're not coming back. I hung up and went to check on Jake. He was bent over his project, completely absorbed, looking so much like the man he was becoming. We were okay. Better than okay. Some flights are just one way, and that's exactly how they're supposed to be. That call from Emma shook me up more than I expected. Not because I missed her, those feelings had long since departed, but because it made me realize how far Jake and I had come. Later that night, after checking on Jake, I found myself on our deck, watching the lights of Seattle twinkle across the water. It was a perfect night for flying, clear skies, steady winds, excellent visibility. Kind of like my life now. Jake joined me outside, wrapped in his favorite NASA hoodie. Everything okay, Dad? You seemed weird after that phone call. Smart kid. Never could hide anything from him. That was Emma, I said, watching his reaction carefully. She wanted to apologize. Jake nodded slowly, processing this information like the thoughtful kid he is. And, do you want to go back? I couldn't help but laugh. Not a chance, buddy. We've built something pretty special here, haven't we? He grinned, that bright smile that always reminds me we made the right choice. Yeah, we have. Plus, I've got that big science fair coming up, and Ginny's birthday party this weekend, and flight lessons on Sunday. Listening to him ramble about his busy life, I felt this overwhelming sense of peace. 2 years ago, I was a husband trying to navigate through heavy turbulence in my marriage. Now, I'm just Dad, and that's the best flight path I could have chosen. The next morning, I deleted Emma's number from my phone. Some passengers are only meant to be with you for part of the journey. The trick is knowing when to let them disembark. Jake and I had breakfast on the deck, watching seaplanes take off into the sunrise. He was excitedly explaining his latest science project, Something about aerodynamics and renewable energy that went way over my head. Dad, he said suddenly, you know what's cool? Even when planes hit turbulence, they always find clear skies eventually. Looking at my son, so wise beyond his years, I couldn't help but smile. Yeah, buddy, they sure do. That evening, I sat in my favorite chair, reviewing my flight plans for the next day. Jake was sprawled on the couch, nose buried in his physics homework. Through the window, I could see Mount Rainier painted pink by the setting sun. Life isn't always smooth flying. Sometimes you hit unexpected turbulence. Sometimes you have to change course. And sometimes you need to make an emergency landing. But if you keep your heading true and trust your instruments, you'll always find your way home. Emma's call wasn't the disruption I'd feared it might be. Instead, it was just the final confirmation that Jake and I had reached our cruising altitude. We'd found our clear skies, our steady course, our perfect flight plan. So people might call it running away, what we did. But I know better. We weren't running away. We were flying towards something better. And man, what a view we found.